Welcome back to the deep dive. For this deep dive, well, we're tackling a giant, arguably the most influential philosophical text, the Bhagavad Gita.
That's right. And specifically, we're zeroing in on Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge.
And this chapter, it's really the core, isn't it? It's where everything turns.
It absolutely is. We're digging into sources, detailing that incredible dialogue. Lord Krishna and Arjuna right there on the battlefield, Kurukshetra.
Right. And our mission, I guess, is to sort of distill how this single chapter takes Arjuna from, well, utter despair, total confusion.
Yeah, complete psychological breakdown.
To this clear path, a path of duty, of knowledge, and achieving that inner balance, what the text calls samatva.
It starts right in the thick of crisis. Arjuna's just overwhelmed. The sources describe him looking out, seeing his family, his revered teachers like Bhishma, Dronacharya.
His own kin.
Exactly, and his eyes fill with tears. He actually says to Krishna, look, I'm confused about my duty. Tell me what's best. I surrender to you. He just can't face killing them.
And it's important to remember the sources stress this. The Pandavas, his side, they believe they were fighting for righteousness.
For Dharma.
Definitely. It wasn't just a land grab.
But Arjuna, he just sees the horror, the destruction, the killing of family, the potential chaos for society afterwards. He's completely torn. Duty versus love, really.
That's the setup. And Krishna's reaction is fascinating. The sources say he just smiled gently.
Smiled in the face of that anguish.
Well, yeah, because this despair, this vishada, it's not seen as just weakness. The tradition frames it as like the necessary darkness before the dawn. Right. Real searching begins when your old ways of thinking completely fail you.
Ah, okay. So Arjuna's hitting rock bottom is actually the first step, his surrender. Saying, I don't know, teach me, that's crucial.
It's the absolute prerequisite. He's ready to listen precisely because his own understanding has collapsed. Okay, so let's unpack that. Krishna's first response, it isn't exactly comforting, is it? He says something like, you grieve for those not worthy of grief, yet you talk like a wise man. The truly wise don't grieve for the living or the dead. That's pretty blunt.
It is blunt. It's a shock tactic almost, designed to immediately cut through Arjuna's mistaken identification.
Mistaken identification, meaning?
Identifying the true self, the eternal part, with the temporary body. Krishna immediately throws down the gauntlet of jnana yoga, the yoga of knowledge. He introduces the Atman, the eternal self.
The self that's unborn, eternal, everlasting, ancient.
Exactly, the constant beneath all the surface changes. And crucially, this self neither slays nor is slain.
So the tragedy Arjuna is imagining, being a killer of souls, is based on a fundamental illusion about who everyone really is.
Precisely. And to make this less abstract, the text uses these brilliant analogies. The first one tackles that inner feeling of permanence.
Right, the body changing.
Yeah, think about it. From when you're a kid to old age, your body's cells completely change over, many times. But that sense of I am, your awareness, that feeling of you, it persists, doesn't it?
It feels constant.
That's the evidence, Krishna suggests, for this unchanging element, the self.
That makes sense. It grounds the idea. And then there's the other big analogy.
The one about death and rebirth. The soul casting off worn-out bodies and taking on new ones, just like you discard old clothes.
Simple, but powerful.
It helps distinguish the real, what the text calls sat, the permanent self, from the unreal, or asat. That's all the transient stuff. The body, senses, pleasure, pain, they're unreal because they're always changing, always fleeting.
So, applying this back to Arjuna, if the self is indestructible and immeasurable, his fear of being the killer is, well, misplaced. He's just part of the process of bodies changing, like clothes.
Exactly. His action affects the garment, not the wearer. And Krishna even offers a kind of backup argument, which is quite clever.
Oh, yeah. For the skeptics.
Sort of. Even if you don't buy the eternal soul idea, he says, even if you think life is just this constant cycle of physical birth and death.
Okay.
Well, death is certain for anyone born, and birth is certain for anyone who dies. And in that view, it's unavoidable, universal.
Yeah.
So why grieve over something you can't possibly prevent?
So either way, eternal soul or cyclical process, his profound grief is illogical from Krishna's perspective.
Right. The sorrow is based on a flawed understanding in either case.
Okay, so that establishes the philosophical foundation, the unchanging self, that reframes the fear but doesn't tell him what to do. He's still standing on a battlefield.
Yeah.
How does Krishna bridge that gap from metaphysics to, well, fighting a war?
And that's the critical pivot. Knowledge of the self takes care of the grief from attachment, sure. But it doesn't mean you stop acting. So Krishna shifts gears. He moves from jnana yoga into karma yoga.
The yoga of action, selfless action.
Exactly. And he brings up swadharma, Arjuna's specific duty. He tells him, look, as a kshatriya, a warrior, fighting a righteous war is your highest good. Running away from it, that leads to sin, disgrace.
So it's not just about knowing the self, it's about acting according to your specific role in the world, your duty.
Yes, and this is revolutionary. Krishna tells him to rise above the dualities: comfort, pain, gain, loss, victory, defeat, honor, dishonor. Forget calculating those. Act only because it's your duty.
Wow. That completely shifts the basis for making decisions. It takes your personal feelings out of the equation, almost.
Almost entirely. It focuses on the necessity of the action itself, based on dharma, on your role.
And this leads us right to probably the most famous verse in the whole Gita, the core of Nishkama Karma Yoga.
Verse 47, right? The one everyone quotes.
That's the one. Your right is only to perform your duty, never to its fruits. Let not the fruits of action be your motive, nor should you be attached to inaction. Okay, let's unpack that. Right is to the duty, not the fruits. Sounds good, but how does that actually work? I mean, if you're trying to get a job or finish a huge project, you kind of need the fruit, the success, right? How do you strive for something without being attached to getting it? Doesn't that just lead to not caring?
Yeah.
Low effort.
That's the crucial point, the common misunderstanding. It's absolutely not about indifference or low effort. Look at the last part.
Yeah.
Nor should you be attached to inaction. Laziness or apathy is also a form of attachment.
Okay.
So, Nishkama Karma demands your absolute best effort. Total focus on performing the duty, the action itself, excellently. Why? Because the action is the only part truly in your control, the outcome. That depends on countless factors beyond you.
Right.
The moment your focus shifts from, I must do this task to the best of my ability because it's my duty, to, oh God, what if I fail? What if I don't get the reward? That's when you lose your inner peace. You've made your mental state dependent on something external and uncertain.
So it's about protecting your mind, your inner stability, rather than becoming apathetic about results.
Exactly. And Krishna defines success on this path very clearly. Perform your duty, abandoning attachment, and remain even-minded in success and failure. That ability to treat those opposites alike, that mental equilibrium, that is yoga.
Samatha, equanimity, that's the goal in the method.
Precisely. And that's why actions done with desire for results, sakama karma, are called inferior.
Why inferior?
Because that constant craving, that mental energy spent worrying about what's in it for me, it comes from what the text called a sense of lack, spiritual poverty. You're always looking outside yourself for fulfillment. True wealth, Krishna implies, is internal. It comes from doing your part perfectly and letting go of the rest.
Okay, so practically speaking, how does acting this way, without attachment, actually free you from the bondage of karma, the karmashaya? What's the mechanism?
Well, the sources explain it like this. Every action you perform, especially when driven by strong desire or aversion, leaves these subtle impressions like footprints in your mind. Samskaras. These generate attachments, raga, things you like and want more of, and aversions, vesha, things you dislike and want to avoid. These likes and dislikes, these dualities, are what keep the mind constantly agitated, constantly chasing or running away.
Okay, that makes sense. Nonstop mental churn.
Exactly. So when you consciously practice selfless action, detaching from the outcome, you stop feeding those patterns. You perform the action because it's needed, but you don't get emotionally hooked on the result. You allow the mental residue, the raga and dvesha, to sort of dissipate. You starve the cycle.
So you break the chain reaction.
You break the chain reaction. And what's really encouraging, especially if you're listening and thinking, wow, this sounds hard.
Yeah, pretty hard.
The text explicitly says, in this yoga of action, there is no loss of effort. Even a tiny bit of practice, it says, delivers one from great fear.
So you don't have to be perfect overnight. Every attempt counts.
The sincerity of the effort is key. And consistent practice over time leads towards that ideal state described later in the chapter, the sita prajna.
The steady wise man. Or person, presumably.
Yes, the person of steady wisdom. This is the realized state, the goal.
Okay, let's break that down. What does this sthita prajna actually look like? How do they operate?
Well, the first characteristic mentioned is pretty profound. They renounce all desires arising within the mind, satisfied in the self alone.
Renounce all desires. Does that mean they just sit in a cave? No ambition, no goals?
Not necessarily. It's more about the source of satisfaction. Their fundamental well-being, their contentment, comes from within, from that connection to the self we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's not dependent on getting this or avoiding that out in the world.
Ah, okay. So they can still act, have goals, but their happiness isn't riding on the outcome.
Exactly. That's why the next verse says their mind is free from agitation when suffering and unaffected by happiness. They remain stable. And crucially, they are free from raga, paya, and krodha, attachment, fear, and anger.
Those three again. Attachment, fear, anger.
They're deeply linked, according to the sources. Fear and anger almost always stem from being attached to something, an outcome, an expectation, an object, even an idea of yourself. When that attachment is threatened, boom, fear or anger.
And how do they achieve this freedom? What's the technique?
Control of the senses is paramount. This is where we get that really vivid analogy of the tortoise.
Right, pulling its limbs in.
Exactly. Just like a tortoise pulls its head and legs into its shell for safety, the wise person learns to withdraw their senses at will from the objects that trigger craving or disturbance.
So not shutting down the senses completely, but mastering them.
Mastering them, using intellect, discrimination buddhi, to decide when and how to engage. Instead, the senses constantly dragging the mind outwards towards every shiny object or potential threat.
Like my phone buzzing nonstop.
That's a perfect modern example. The sthita prajna wouldn't be compulsively grabbing it. They'd keep the limbs of attention withdrawn until their intellect says, okay, now is the appropriate time to engage with this. It's conscious engagement versus automatic reaction.
Because if you fail to control that initial pull, that leads to the danger zone.
Yes. And Krishna lays out that famous chain reaction, the psychological cascade of failure. It's a stark warning.
Let's walk through that chain. It's really insightful.
It starts subtly. Just dwelling on sense objects, thinking about them, fantasizing maybe.
Okay. Step 1, dwelling.
From dwelling comes attachment. You start to feel you need that object or experience. From attachment grows desire, kama, intense craving.
Dwelling, attachment, desire. Got it.
Then inevitably, desire gets blocked. Thwarted desire leads to anger, krodha.
Right. You don't get what you want. You get mad.
From anger comes delusion, moha. You lose perspective, can't think clearly. Delusion leads to loss of memory, smriti vibrama. You forget your principles, your training, what's truly important.
Like forgetting your higher goals in a fit of rage.
Exactly. And loss of memory leads to the destruction of the intellect, buddhinasha. Your reasoning power collapses. And from the destruction of intellect, the person falls down, perishes, essentially, in terms of their inner progress, making terrible choices, self-destructing.
Wow. All starting from just dwelling on something too much.
It shows how critical that initial sense control, that withdrawal, really is. Contrast that whole downward spiral with the state of the person who has mastered their inner self.
What's that state like?
Inner peace, contentment. They operate in the world using their senses under control, free from attraction and repulsion. They remain, as the text says, affectionless everywhere, meaning not tossed about by likes and dislikes. Neither overly thrilled by pleasure nor devastated by pain.
Stable, equanimous.
That's the goal. The ultimate attainment, described at the very end of the chapter, is the Brahmic state, supreme peace. And it's reached by abandoning all desires, possessiveness, mayamness, and the egoism alignment.
So letting go of that constant I, me, mine.
That's the final step. And it brings us back to the core insight. This equanimity, samatha, isn't just a passive state. Krishna calls it skill in action, yoga karmasu kushalam, because it's the skill that frees you from the bondage of your own reactions.
So for you listening, this chapter really offers a roadmap. It starts with the big picture, the unchanging reality, the Sankhya knowledge. Then it shows how that knowledge fuels purposeful, effective, and internally peaceful action karma yoga. It's a structure for moving from inner turmoil to focused clarity.
It truly is. And perhaps a final thought to leave you with, something from the sources. Krishna remarks that for the sage, absorbed in the self, the normal worldly pursuits, chasing sense pleasures, it's like living in the dark. It's spiritual night. While abiding in that inner knowledge is day.
Night versus day.
So the provocative question is, looking at your own life, your own duties, your modern swadharma, what activities genuinely align you with your inner eternal day? And which ones perhaps keep you caught in that spiritual night of chasing the perishable?
A powerful distinction to reflect on. Moving from just knowing these ideas to actually living them. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
See you next time.